talk about the pace of change, I guess. You talked about, I guess, full disclosure, I work for New York Presbyterian Hospital, so I'm the only idiot here in this suit. Putting aside what's going on with Medicare and Medicaid, let's talk about commercial plans, because obviously that's what you know best. There's been capitation out on the West Coast for years now. Even up in Massachusetts, Blue Cross has got their AQC, but none of these things have really bent the cost curve in a meaningful way, as I understand it, because they've been so rich that no one's had to make hard choices.
So I would tell you that that's partially true, because if you look at the costs of healthcare in the state of California versus New York or and the East Coast, they are dramatically less. The premiums are less. Organized medicine is, but what's happened, you're right, is that like in New York, right, when Oxford first got started, we had like 300 docs. By the time we like built up into something meaningful, we might have had like 6,000 doctors, and we were growing amazingly, right? But then all of a sudden it became like any willing provider came in, which at this, there's the law coming in with any willing provider, right? Any doctor who's willing to accept your rates, you got to take. Well, so I went to the state, actually went to Washington and argued for any willing employee. I was willing to take any CEO salary of any of the large companies. They therefore needed to hire me. It was a nice argument we got into, because it was equally ludicrous to me that I should just have the right as an employee to go declare my salary and go work anywhere. So we ended up with 36,000 doctors. Now, you have no market share in any of those doctors, right? Organized medicine is actually has worked very well. Now, the other difference in California, though, is Kaiser. Kaiser's irrelevant here. It's 10% to 20% of every population of people in the state of California just goes to Kaiser. And they're a little like HIP is here, in the sense that you're a Kaiser baby, you're a HIP baby. If you've been born a HIP baby, you raise your children, when your kids are born, you put them in HIP, right? Organized medicine actually does work in terms of global capitation with information and access. I think that Kaiser does some amazing things, right? But there was a study done by a guy named David Nash who once said that, the reality of many physicians don't want to go to work for an employer. So once capitation, or once any one health plan was responsible for more than 40% of my practice, I dropped that health plan, because I don't want to be, I opened a single shingle, if you will. And I think one of the massive changes that we're seeing right now, one of the seismic changes that's occurring, is the acquisition of practices. The hospitals acquiring doctor practices, the health plans acquiring doctor practices. The reality of that is that the doctor's now a paid employee of a health plan, or the paid employee of a hospital. I can't see that actually having a long-term positive life for that doctor, right? One of the advantages of Kaiser, how many of you people have grown up on the West Coast to know, because it's a very, very different healthcare system. The other thing that's fascinatingly different between West Coast and East is Medicaid costs are dramatically less, because everybody in the West Coast gets to eat fresh vegetables. Folks in the Bronx, they ain't no Goya in California. I mean, it is a very different dynamic with regard to health of eating and lifestyle. And so the Medicaid populations are very, very different in terms of cost structure, right? But it's fascinating, because it's a fascinating cultural thing. The Kaiser model came to New York and basically fundamentally failed. Westchester had failed, right? Now, the ACOs may have a chance. Global capitation, do you know what I'm talking about when I say global capitation? Everybody get it, or should I? Okay, so this is how the money happens, right? You can either be paid in what's called fee-for-service, so you're reimbursed for the claim on the codes that you submit, or you're reimbursed per patient on a global percentage, regardless of the amount of care that you provide. So capitation was a very successful model that tried to come east that never really stuck in the East Coast. And the model was each of us, if I was the doctor, I'd get $10 a month. And there's actuarials based on our age and sex and everything. I'd get $10 a month for each of you. So I'm making, let's assume $3,000 a month. It's my job to manage the care within that budget, right? Now, I'm the primary care. I also have a referral fund for specialists and for hospitals, and it gets to be a very complex model. The reality is the folks in California know how to work it. They know how to manage it. They grow up in it. They know how to manage it. I know guys who are dentists who've made fortunes building one practice after another on capitation and then selling the whole thing off, right? People here have fundamentally no understanding of how to effectively manage that type of environment because they're used to just doing everything they can for each patient and not taking a look. And information has changed some of that. Well, ACOs, which is the new form of care delivery that's embedded fundamentally in the Patient Protection Act, has global capitation at its core, where doctor groups or hospitals will soon serve as essentially an insurance company. The risk has been passed down to them. The health plan is nothing more than a marketing enterprise that is responsible for acquiring the people into the respective plans and then providing membership services and other things outside the normal delivery of care, if you will. Okay? That model that's a seismic change. It is coming across the country. I think it has worked in California with regards to if you look at the per member per month. But you made the point before about the speed of change. This is a regulatory thing that is being thrust. People are in a scramble. They don't know what they're doing. I've sat with Toby Cosgrove, and guys at Cleveland Clinic and the heads of Mayo and everything, and they're like, oh my God, I have no idea, because it basically renders some of that they do, it's scary. Now they're stuck as a brick and mortar operation in a world that can't be brick and mortar, right? It's scary. And I don't know if you've ever heard this before, but from proof to practice is 17 years. So if evidence says do the following thing, it takes 17 years for greater than 70% of the medical community to actually practice that way. When it comes to drugs. Yes. But that same, if you use that as a curve, drugs are kind of one of the easier things. The same thing happens in some other practices. I mean, believe me, medical records have been going on for 20 some years, right? So I get it, though. This is not remember, the medical community, and this is a matter of understanding your audiences. One of the things, our lines at Oxford was, doctors are bright people who didn't ever go to college to get B's. They are competitive by nature. Put the information at their fingertips, they'll compete with each other. And they're researchers. One of the reasons why they won't adopt is because I need to know the answer. Is the answer really there? Is this, and so we basically created a model where we said, let's get out of the way. Let's actually put the information in the fingertips. So I'm going to go back to one of the questions asked before. We created a thing called private practice partnerships, which was organizing groups of doctors, globally capitating the doctors, giving them the money, and then we were putting the information in their hands to show them what was going on. So we'd get in front of a group of doctors, and I'll never forget doing this in front of a famous medical group in Westchester, and saying, Larry has the highest generic substitution rate of all the docs. And everybody applauded Larry, right? And then we clicked to the next slide and said, but there's a problem. Every patient that Larry sees is getting drugs. Generic, but every patient's getting drugs. And everybody looked at him like, Larry, really? And the interesting thing was, what happened was it wasn't a health plan denying benefits. It wasn't a health plan denying claims. It wasn't a health plan saying this is not medically necessary. It was peer pressure of a group of doctors who were all part of the global pool of money, turning to Larry and saying, come on, really? It was their money, not ours. And that behavior actually changed Larry within 30 days. So we talk about information technology, we talk about things, that's where you win. You win if you enable doctors to do, like, behavior object tools to like look at things, to be able to understand. Don't tell them, give them the tool to enable them. They are bright people, male people, they are bright people. They will get the answers. They're going to find it. But you got to create the tools that enable that. And that's the difference, is that health plans have fundamentally been set up on medical necessity. Evidence is great. But, you know, as an example, in the medical community with evidence, if every doctor practiced a protocol on treatment, $350 billion would be saved. So we went to the government and said, if you eliminate tort reform for those who practice to the evidence, why should anybody be sued if they're practicing to the latest evidence? Right? Eliminate tort reform. This is the tort reform. Eliminate any lawsuit. And no liability, you practice the latest evidence. How could you be responsible? Are you kidding me? You know, now we, of course, remember who you're dealing with. All the lawyers started come flying in the door. It was like we just wiped out a massive set of practices for, you know, for a whole bunch of people. So